So let's get started. That's what we're here to do. Our first track of the day, monetization, optimization, and Apple's new normal. Great topic, very timely. And we have as our guest, Justin Welter, VB, Brand Performance and Business Development, sharing examples that we'll be listening in here about how publishers are addressing Apple's new requirements. And I'm sure it's going to be a great pick as well, because a little bit of a fun fact here, it's in his DNA, as I understand it, Justin. You were a varsity poultry judge at Oklahoma State University prior to graduating, joining Google. So if you can pick them, this is it. I'll leave it to you.
So thank you guys. Thank you all so much. Good morning from sunny, not so sunny really, San Francisco. I'm excited to speak with you all today. Really appreciate the opportunity. As said, I'm here to talk about monetization optimization in Apple's new normal. So as we know, there's a lot of changes that are coming down the pike with regards to iOS 14 and specifically around privacy, specifically around tracking, specifically around attribution. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about those changes, talk a little bit about the mobile app ecosystem, obviously kind of introduce AdColony a little bit, but specifically talk about how Apple's upcoming changes are going to impact that ecosystem, right? I mean, there's obviously, it's going to impact all of us, and I think that there's a lot to discuss. So kind of jump into things. So a little bit about AdColony. We were founded in 2008 by game developers for game developers. Our bread and butter is really in-app rewarded video. What we do really is we work to match the most engaging creative to the right user at the right time, and really focusing on ensuring that publishers have the highest eCPM possible as a result of that. Since our founding, we've found that there is a certain kind of monetization journey that occurs. And so specifically, and I'm sure we're all very familiar with this, but a developer launches an app, they'll do user acquisition via ads or cross promotion for that app, right? The next step will obviously be to monetize those users, typically done by either in-app purchases or in some cases, revenue through ads. And then the final step in that journey is really kind of taking those monetization revenues and then reinvesting them, if you will, into gaining new users. And so the point of this is that basically this is kind of a circular journey that kind of goes from launching an app to monetizing that app to finding new users to that. And I don't think that this is anything new for any of us, but I think it does. When we're kind of in the midst of this journey, we kind of ask ourselves, what is the best way to leverage ads to monetize our content without kind of sacrificing any type of user experience. And I think that the reality is that the market has kind of, luckily the industry really has kind of come to a consensus on that. And what it is that users truly prefer value exchanges as opposed to not. So users are more comfortable with ads when they're given a choice. And what I mean by that is that, if you're playing a game and a user is able to, let's say, have an option between, being shown an ad or, doing an in-app purchase, the user is much more comfortable and open to ads when they are given that opportunity for a value exchange, when they're given that option. And so specifically, what do I mean by that? What does that look like? Here's an example of a video ad in one of our publishers where the publisher is able to, there's an opportunity for an ad to be shown. The user is able to click on that ad, click to watch that ad rather, and then a Hilton ad is shown. And as a result of this kind of experience at a high level, this is actually 3 times more preferable by users as opposed to non-skippable pre-roll videos, and is actually results in 90% more, 90% higher video completion rates. And so with that, in conjunction with the astronomical growth that we have seen in the market in gaming, gaming is projected to be 3 billion users plus globally by 2023. And then you add in the fact that there are the vast majority of the users, the vast majority of this time that they spend is actually, when it comes to their digital time, is actually spent 68% of their time is spent in mobile apps. For the segments of 18 to 44, there's no real wonder as to why marketers are interested in mobile gaming, right? And it also kind of speaks to why these changes are in the ecosystem, especially by Apple, are so important to marketers and to publishers, because it really is going to impact not only how they specifically monetize their content, but then also how they do user acquisition. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about two of those changes, specifically around IDFA opt-ins and around SK Ad Network, and then kind of discuss some best practices that we've seen publishers leverage, and then also some best practices going forward with regards to how publishers can better monetize their content in these changes. So first and foremost, as I think most of us know, IDFA is going away, is changing to a opt-in experience. And so what that means is that basically, for monetization and for tracking purposes, Apple is basically requiring the publishers get permission from users in order to obtain and track that IDFA. And so what does that mean? Well, there's going to be a prompt. I think we're pretty much familiar with what this prompt is. We've seen it probably on the location side of things, but this is going to be new for the tracking purposes of things. And that prompt will basically, a user will have to accept to that in order for the publisher to obtain the IDFA. And if they accept, well, everything's going to continue as normal. But if they deny, well, then they won't have that, publishers won't have that IDFA for tracking purposes. And if they do anything around trying to fingerprint or track the users, assuming that the user has told them not to, then they risk actually being completely banned from the App Store. So the point of this is that there are huge implications that can occur here. And the question for a publisher becomes, how do I get the highest opt-in rates? How do I increase my chances of getting an opt-in? Because this isn't going to be something that you can ask every 30 days. This is going to be, as I understand, basically a one and done kind of scenario. And so what I want to kind of do is show some best practices that we've seen with publishers to kind of discuss a little bit what those, how to kind of ensure that you're getting the highest opt-in rates possible. So here's Facebook. I'm sure we're all familiar with this. This is actually some testing that they've done. I haven't actually seen this on my app yet, but I've heard that this is kind of going around at this point. And what this is this is kind of a pre-prompt that they've kind of created. And what is within this pre-prompt is basically very clear indication as to what's being tracked and why it's being used. And this kind of goes back to, showing exactly creating transparency with the user and a clear understanding of what that value exchange is that we kind of referred to earlier with rewarded, right? We feel that in showing users a choice, right, or giving them an understanding of things, I think that they're more open to kind of interacting with stuff. And so point being is this kind of, in transparency, the goal is to allow for users to have a higher opt-in rate overall. And so there's a couple examples I want to show that are from the industry that I think are kind of unique and interesting. So first and foremost is Among Us from Innersloft. This is unique for a variety of reasons. Basically, this is a pre-prompt that happens right when you open up the app upon launch. And it has a clear indication as to what the policy is, what's collected, why it's collected. But there's two kind of interesting things about this that I wanted to kind of highlight. First and foremost, this is something they've been doing prior to all the announcements with Apple. This is something that's been kind of in there, I think, really from the beginning of their launch on the app side of things. And what's unique about this wording is it basically says, hey, we use Google AdMob. AdMob collects certain information. We can't control what that information is. We can't turn that information off. If you're uncomfortable with this for any reasons, you can basically, choose to remove the ads. You'll be brought, and then basically it brings them to a storefront where they can basically purchase, an ad-free version of the app, right? And then go from there. And then of course, obviously, if they want to accept, they can accept and continue on playing the game as usual. But again, this is something that's kind of interesting because it specifically says everything is collected. It tells you whether the ad personalization is on, asks you if you want to remove ads, and then you have the opportunity to accept, right? Another example that I like is this example from Ball Blast by Voodoo. And I call this, kind of refer to this as ask, educate, and then the ask again approach. And so what happens here specifically is you have a pre-prompt again. That pre-prompt, let's say, for instance, you choose no. Then you're brought to kind of a branded panel that basically explains, why we use this, why it's important to us as app developers. And it kind of allows for the publisher to actually educate the user as to what is the value exchange that's occurring. Obviously, then the user can basically choose to continue, and they'll brought back to the actual Apple prompt, or they can choose to kind of go through an in-app purchase and choose an ad-free version of the app. But again, this is kind of interesting because it focusing on that value exchange and explicitly determining what that is, right? Obviously, if the user wants, they can go straight and say, "Hey, I allow for this, no problems," and they're brought back to the Apple prompt, and they can choose to allow for tracking there. And then another example that I think is kind of interesting. This is kind of a unique example. I call this kind of the branded animation or branded pre-prompt. And basically what happens here is that upon launching the app, there's kind of a branded interstitial that basically says, okay, again, pre-prompt that explains what's being tracked, why it's being tracked, etc. And if you look at this, basically, there's an animation that emphasizes the user to click OK. And if they do so, then they're brought to the prompt. If they click don't allow, then there's potentially a one-time nudge, if you will, where either that animation will move over to the OK, or maybe the interstitial will kind of shake a little bit, something will occur. That's basically one time that says, hey, look, like we would really prefer for you to do this. And so this is kind of unique, a little bit different. And I think it's kind of, it allows for some type of interaction within the app for some type of branded content that is, let's say, maybe in tune with the brand and what the app is proposing. I think with all of these examples, it's important to say that there are no hard and fast rules. It's all comes down to, your users, your app, what you feel is best for them. Apple really hasn't said that there are specific best practices around this. They haven't really said what will be allowed in the pre-prompt, quote unquote, and what won't be. And so I think it's important to do some testing here. I would say also that because you have the potential of that pre-prompt being disapproved or not approved rather, that it's important to kind of test this in maybe some of your long tail apps as opposed to like flagship apps, just because you don't want to be in a situation where you create a different experience and then ultimately that experience is disallowed. So again, just to kind of emphasize, these are all kind of some suggestions that we've seen in the ecosystem. I think they're all kind of interesting and different, and I think they're going to be important to kind of experiment to see how to get the highest opt-in rates possible. Another item that's going to be kind of announced and I think is important to understand is SK Ad Network. I'm sure that most people have kind of just heard about this or kind of have kind of a brief understanding. I'm not going to go into the technical aspects of things, but I do want to just kind of provide a brief overview of what SK Ad Network is and why it's important. So basically what it is it's Apple's attempt to do attribution in a privacy safe manner, right? And so we're kind of taking away from the IDFA world and we're kind of entering into Apple's kind of attribution world where everything is going to be focused on privacy. And I think what's most important in all the details that you're looking at and kind of analyzing is that basically everything said and done, AdColony is completely integrated into SK Ad Network and is basically future-proof for the iOS 14 launches that are occurring. What is important to understand, though, with all of this changes that are occurring is it will affect monetization. And because of the various reporting delays that SK Ad Network are going to have, some privacy limitations, it really means that basically managing your waterfall is going to become a lot less scientific. What's going to happen is that you're going to have a lot more contextual targeting as opposed to like audience targeting. And as a result, your ad networks, their performance is going to vary day to day, week to week. There's going to be a lot more fluctuation. And so actually managing waterfalls on a day-to-day basis is going to be quite, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because of those fluctuations. It's going to be a lot less predictable. And so we suggest, as a result of that, to move forward with header bidding options, R2B, advanced bidding, whatever you want to call it, and implement that, because it's going to allow for you to have a lot more kind of granular controls, a lot more better performance, as opposed to managing the waterfalls within this kind of changing environment. So specifically, what does that mean? Why is that? If you're not familiar, basically header bidding or advanced bidding is basically a programmatic auction that happens for every single impression, where all the ad networks are able to compete on that impression in real time. And so as a result, you are guaranteed higher CPMs because everybody's competing. Only the highest eCPM and the highest bid wins. And so you have, higher revenue for your apps. But then I think also there's more competition, and there's less latency because you're not really working to kind of optimize the overall kind of waterfall on a day-to-day basis, et cetera. And so strong suggestion to move forward with that, given these changes in SK ad network, because, I think everybody's trying to figure out specifically how will that affect things. And I think it will obviously, as discussed, have implications on how you kind of manage your ad network stack. Full list of kind of the advanced bidding, R2B, header bidding partners. I think it's important just to say that, AdColony works with all of these partners. We do have now a shared owner in Digital Turbine between us and Fiverr, but I think it's also very important for us to say that and to emphasize that we have been kind of agnostic in this space, and we will continue to be agnostic. And so we're going to work with all the players in space. Obviously, it's important for us to do so. And so, just to kind of emphasize that this is going to be something that's going to be important going forward, and we will work with, we work with all the players to help you kind of implement this technology. And so that's kind of the gist of things. I think that these two changes are going to be obviously important for publishers moving forward, are going to have implications on how you kind of monetize your content, and obviously also on the other side of things, how you do your UA. And so just wanted to kind of point these out, introduce us a little bit, and then talk about some of those changes, and hopefully help to allow you to better monetize your content going forward. And hopefully that content will be monetized through AdColony. So thank you.
Thank you as well, Justin. And you finished literally just in time. Questions are coming in. I'll start off with a couple here. How do we account for the fairly consistent use of tablets across the age segments? I guess this goes back to the data you were showing earlier.
Yeah, I think that actually is accounted into there. I don't know of the specifics there, but I am certain that our team can follow up and provide that information to the team. But I believe that is, when we're looking at mobile devices are inclusive of tablet inventory as well.
Mm-hmm. Some really fascinating best practices. And people are wondering also some additional ones. I mean, that was your pick, literally. Is there one that you didn't add that you might have had you had the time?
There's a lot of changes that are down the pike, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are, I think that the thing that we're most kind of focusing on with discussions with our publishers is this move to advanced bidding, but then also we would also probably emphasize using a hybrid approach as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that AdColony offers is a hybrid approach to helping publishers monetize their content. So if you still want to have that option of having a traditional waterfall, it's certainly something that we can do and help to monetize you with.
Okay. Question here from Dan or Don Creek. What do you think the drop of income will be?
TBD. I don't think that we have a full understanding of what that's going to look like. I think that that's going to depend on a variety of things. Whether it's going to really depend on how many people get the overall industry, how many like opt-ins you get on IDFA, because that's going to impact how
Mm-hmm.
everybody monetizes. And so I think it's yet to be determined. There's some rough estimates there. I don't have them in front of me, but there's some rough estimates that you can probably find through some research as what people think that's going to be. And so I think that's why we're kind of, focusing on how do publishers get that opt-in, and then also how do they kind of leverage advanced bidding as kind of a hedge to those changes.
Okay, lots of questions coming in, Justin. You're just going to have to bear with me, and they want your estimates. They're is there some kind of estimation of the impact on eCPMs or CPI, or maybe expected variations by segments of games, or is all wait and see? Stefan Rapinel wants to know that. Stefan.
I think it's going to be a combination of both. I think that there are certainly going to be, if you don't do advanced bidding, then you will probably see a variation of eCPMs affected across different industry or inventory segments. So let's say different types of games in this example. Again, I don't have hard numbers just because we don't know yet. Like there's very little, there hasn't been a lot of testing that has been done. The actual launch of this, the opt-in for IDFA hasn't occurred yet. And so it's hard to kind of say, this is what's going to occur. But I would say, again, like your best bet is to hedge by implementing some type of RTB programmatic advanced bidding implementation.
Okay. Jonathan Harrop, to all panelists, instead of only just in Q&A, if someone chooses to go the advanced bidding route, is more ad networks better? So is more better, more partners?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I think that that's better. If you look at it, what's going to happen is you're going to have kind of an impression by impression competition. So if I'm a publisher, I would much rather have 10 ad networks competing as opposed to just one. But then again, at the same time, it's kind of a focus of, it's a question of what does the publisher want? So maybe one publisher has a handful of networks that they prefer to work with. Maybe they want to do only video ads as opposed to video and display. Maybe they want to have some type of, maybe they have preferences with regards to, rewarded ads versus not. And so those are kind of choices that the publisher has. But as a whole, I would say that the more competition is probably better.
Okay. No, we're doing fine. We have more questions. We have a little bit more time. Another one for you. Many UA channels have moved to CPM bidding instead of SK Ad Network. And we've seen that. So our audience wants to know, what is the impact and how will it shape up in the future?
That is a great question. And I think that that is something that is occurring. And because if you are taking out kind of some of the science that's involved on the back end, some ad networks are kind of forced to kind of move to just a straight CPM type of structure for payments and for bidding. And so it's definitely something that I think is going to occur. It's definitely, I've personally heard a lot of rumbling about that. Again, I don't know the specifics of, I think it's one of those things that maybe the first 30 days or first, maybe let's say quarter or so, you'll see kind of an emphasis on CPM bidding, especially on iOS, as opposed to CPI bidding, for example, because of these changes. And so what will happen is kind of, there'll be certainly some testing on that to understand what performance will look like and how it impacts overall CPMs.
And the overall fluctuation, is that what we'll be seeing, what you hinted at in your presentation?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So a little bit of uncertainty and certainty that there will be fluctuation.
That's correct.
Uncertainty about the range. Okay. One thing we are certain about is that privacy tracking, it's a major term. Our question here, it's a scary term, but consumers are often targeted, or they even like targeted ads, as you showed, personalized content. Can you share anything about how users feel about these ads, changes to IDFA? So we have someone who really wants to know more data around that 90% that you started out with. Do you have some more insights or something related to IDFA?
There's certainly a lot of information out there. I don't have any the hard data right from me right now, but I know that there was a very interesting report by Mary Meeker and her group a couple years ago about the desire for users to have. Mary Meeker is a large VC out here in Silicon Valley who focuses on kind of internet trends, and there was a large conversation about kind of rewarded ad types and specifically kind of users wanting to opt into that value exchange as opposed to being forced into it. And so there's certainly a desire by users. It comes down to, would you rather, from a publisher standpoint, would you rather have your users to have a positive user experience where they're not kind of forced to have a pre-roll, for example, and they have the choice of saying, hey, you can either watch a video ad or you can pay for an upgrade. And so I think that is what the root of this conversation is around, user choice and user experience and kind of transparency there, because it provides the publisher to kind of say, this is why we need this. This is what we're doing. This is why it's important. And it
Mhm.
allows the user to have a choice to say, well, I can either go this route or I can go that route. And so I think that that's something that's appreciated in the industry.
Absolutely. And those best practice examples that you showed, really appreciated, because that shows you can do something as simple as like an innovative type of animation, that's a little bit of a nudge, not nagging, just saying, here I'm being very transparent, very open about this. And that seems to be the theme, I think, through your talk about that as well.
Correct.
We still have more questions, but we are up on time. I hope that maybe you will join the audience in Discord, or what were you planning to continue
I'd be
the
happy to.
conversation, I would
Yeah. So
hope?
if there's some more questions, I'll jump into there in the next
Okay,
couple of minutes, and happy to answer any specific questions.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Justin, for sharing. It was a very
Thank you,
interesting
Peggy. It was a pleasure.
conversation.
Thank you so
Obviously
much.
resonated with the audience. They want to figure out the workarounds, and you
Yeah.
have offered exactly that. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. You all enjoy and have enjoy the rest of your day. And I will jump into the Discord now for everybody.
You're on.
Awesome.
Okay.